morning, children. In the last class, we discussed a few important topics of first lesson as a part of essay 1 revision. Today, let me discuss important topics of friction, important concept from friction. And I asked you to write that essay 1 revision questions in a classwork, back of your classwork. Turn the book and make it as a heading essay 1 revision and write that questions. Okay, daily whatever the questions we are giving, whatever the concept we are repeating, please children concentrate on that and read that concepts. Okay, from the first lesson, contact force, non-contact force, tension force, normal force, gravitational force, magnetic force, electrostatic force, pressure, effects of a pressure force, and units of pressure, units of force, all these topics we have discussed. Now second lesson, revision starts, that is a friction. What is meant by friction? Opposite force, resistance force is said to be a friction. Here you can see on the figure 1, pushing the book. Pushing the book is one example. Now when a force acting on the book, and when we push the book, certain types of forces act on the book, that is book is moving along the table. So it is a normal force is acting on that, and gravitational force and your force in the form of a frictional force also act. So the force applied by the floor on the book is said to be a frictional force or a friction. Frictional force or a friction. Clear? Next one, simple activity is described to understand the concept, that is understanding the nature of friction and the concept of static friction. What are the materials required? A toy trolley, small wooden block, inextensible string, weight hanger, weights, pulley and a table. All these materials we required. And what happens when we pull the trolley with the thread, with the string, wooden block also moves. From the simple example you can understand sliding friction. The sliding friction is a friction which comes into play when the surface of one object moves with respect to the surface of other object. Relative to the surface of another object, if one surface moves with the relative of the surface of another object, such friction is said to be a sliding friction. Clear? Next, observing the variations of frictions. Here you can see the figure 6, boy is pushing the box, and in figure 7 with a greater force is pushing, and figure 8 complete position force is applied to move the object. So at that position what you are observing, the box is moving aside. From this we can say that when a force is applied, the opposite force to that object is said to be a resistance force. Factors affecting friction. What are the factors? Roughness and smoothness also affect the friction. Suppose just you are spreading the silk cloth or a banana peel and you are walking on that. Is it comfort to you? You may fall. You won't have the proper grip. So frictional force increases. So frictional force depends upon roughness and smoothness. And next, effect area of contact and frictional force. What is the effect of area of contact? You can see the both the figures. What are that? That is a figure 12 and figure 12 and 10. What you are going to observe here? The brick is in a horizontal position and brick is in a vertical position. They are pulling with the spring balance. In which case effect will be the more area of contact. So what he is going to conclude from this? So frictional force is independent of the area of the contact. Whatever may be the position, if you pull the object, definitely it comes. So it is independent. Independent means it's not dependent on the area of contact. Okay. Next, effect of normal force and friction. Effect of normal force on friction. What is the effect of normal force? Is the normal force also affects the friction or not? Yes, it affects the friction. That is, normal friction is directly proportional to normal force. Friction is directly proportional to the normal force. So as the friction increases, normal force also increases. Normal force increases, frictional force also increases. Is friction necessary? Yes. To do our day-to-day activities, friction is necessary. To write, eat, bathing, eating, driving, walking. In all the cases, without friction we can't hold the object properly. Why? It slips from our hand due to gravitational attraction. So friction is most important, and advantages and disadvantages of friction also there. Friction produces heat. Yes, definitely. Continuously you can see that rubbing the hands, does it produces the heat? Yes. And mastic, when it rubs to the sides of the matchbox, it produces the heat. So from this we can say that friction produces a heat. And next, how to reduce the friction? How you will reduce the friction? Already we discussed in our first lesson by adding the lubricants, oil, grease and ball bearings, and shoe will have the grooved surface. All this help us to get a good grip, and it reduces the friction. The road is a slippery. If you wear the smooth slippers, definitely you will slip. So at that time you should think that I should wear the chappal or slipper shoes. You should have the grooved surface. Why? What is the use of the grooved surface? It gives the hold, proper grip on the road, and reduces the friction. Continuously your door is making a sound. Just add 1-2 drops of a oil or a grease. What happens? Adding oil or a grease, it forms a layer between the hinges and the door, and interlocking the object stops. Rubbing of each object stops. Suppose oil is dropped in this, it forms a layer. Automatically when 2 hands rubs, the layer is their oil layer, it stops interlocking the objects. In such a way you can discuss. See, you can see here, bottom of the shoe, it is a grooved surface. Why they will apply the grooved surface? Why they will give the grooved surface to this? To get a good grip. What important role does friction play in the life of human beings and animals? Yes, to do our day-to-day activities, we have to use a frictional force. If not, it slips from our hand, and due to gravitational force. So friction plays a great role in doing our day-to-day activities like eating, bathing, driving, walking, sleeping, inserting a nail, holding a pen, writing. All these functions are carried due to friction. And why friction important for transport? If the friction is not applied, what happens? And the friction force is not applied on the steering, the vehicle will stay there only because of gravitational force. So friction also plays a great role in a transport, to move the vehicle from one place to other place. And how we will reduce the friction? Oiling, greasing, applying the lubricants, paints, making a surface smooth. In this way we can reduce the friction. And you can see the pattern of a tires. It is a grooved surface. Why they will use a grooved surface, ma? Because in the grooved surface it gives a good grip. To get a good grip, they will use a grooved surface on that. And effects of rollers and friction. Carom board. In carom board and in gymnastics, they apply this force surface on their hands to reduce the friction. If not, it slips from their hand and they can't do that gymnastics. Even while playing the carom board, they will sprinkle the borax or something powder on that to reduce the friction. Effect of rollers and friction. So carrying the heavy load, that is a suitcase, is difficult, but if we have the rollers, pullers, easy to pull that. So frictional force also reduces by using that. A simple activity is given. Just take a pencil and place some coins or coins on that, and place one book. Just pull it. It is easy to move. So from this way we can reduce the friction. What is the rolling friction? When an object, one body rolls over the surface of another body, then the friction is said to be a rolling friction. Here in the figure 19 you can see the rolling friction. Suitcase with the rollers also is example for rolling friction. Next, understanding the principle of ball bearings. Bearing, generally we'll discuss, we'll call it as a bearing. Bearings are gone in a fan, what we say, coolers, vehicles. So what is meant by bearing? Bicycle. Bearing is nothing but they will arrange 2 plates in between a balls. Cherra will call it as. So when we move that, what happens? Automatically it stop interlocking with each both the objects together and it reduces the friction. So if the balls are gone, automatically two plates in contact with each other, when they rub, it produces a sound. Sometimes in our fans and refrigerators, coolers, vehicles, bicycle, it produces a sound. So when we take to the repairer, you say that bearing pointy. What is meant by bearing? Ball bearings only. You can see the arrangement of ball bearings. You can do at home that. Take two plates, arrange marbles in that first plate and just invert the plate on that and rotate. When we invert the plate, what happens? Marbles are helping it, forming as a layer not to interact with the first plate. So when marbles are taken out, automatically two plates are rubbed with each other and produces a sound. Fluid friction. Fluid means the substance which flows from one substance to other subject for other place is said to be a fluid. Even gas is also fluid and liquid is also said to be a fluid. So next one is the frictional force exerted by fluids is called a drag. What is meant by drag, ma? The frictional force exerted by the fluids is known as a drag. And you can see the figure 22, board and aeroplane. By observing the nature, scientists developed the aeroplane which is in the form of a shape of a board, and the shape also plays a great role in reducing the friction. With the help of wings, it pushes the air back. In return, it moves the forward, and same principle is used. So with this, all the important concept we revised. What is a friction? Friction opposes the relative motion between two surfaces in contact. And static friction comes into play when object moves, when we try to move an object at rest related to the surface of another object. Sliding friction comes into play when object is slides over another surface. Friction depends upon nature of the surface, normal force, and friction is independent of area of contact. Friction can be reduced by using lubricants, ball bearings, oil, grease. When body is moved through fluids exert frictional force called a drag. All these topics we have discussed. Now let me talk about the question answers. What kind of frictions do you know, and explain with suitable example. And that answer is important. Underline. Give few examples of sliding friction. Explain how lubricants reduces friction. Explain why do sportsmen use a shoe with spike. Would it be easier or difficult to you to walk on a marble floor with a soapy water? What happens if we do not reduce friction in machines? What happens with what purpose is solved by ball bearings in machines? Draw a free body diagram, various forces acting in that. So how you will write the answers, all I feel is most important, but 1-2 answers will write as a practice. Fourth one you write, explain how does lubricant reduces friction. Again I am repeating, don't feel that these questions only important. Everything to make as a practice of writing, just I am giving few questions to write and few questions to learn. Okay, next, fourth question. Next, application of concept. First one, explain why do sportsmen use shoe with spike. What happens if we reduce friction in machines? Third one. Next, do you agree? Here are thinking questions. Fourth one also. What purpose is solved by ball bearings? That one. Then here are thinking questions. First one, do you agree with the statement friction is both good and evil? Explain with example. Next, scientists designed the shape of aeroplane using the technique of reducing friction by observing board shape. How do you appreciate? So all these questions you have to write one time in a classwork, back of the classwork and read. Okay.